Good evening, everyone. My name is Nandi Kaul, and welcome to the final networking event of the virtual Apex Business Plan competition. We have a very exciting panel exploring the future of entrepreneurship in the new normal, and it is my pleasure to introduce our moderator for the evening, Krista Ross. Krista joined the Fredericton Chamber of Commerce as CEO in September of 2011. In 2017, she was chosen in 2017 she was chosen Chamber Executive of the Year by Chamber of Commerce Executives of Canada, and in 2020, amidst a pandemic, she was selected as one of the top 50 CEOs in Atlantic Canada by the Atlantic Business magazine. Krista was also a general manager of the Fredericton Chamber from 1989 to 97, followed by 14 years as an award winning private business owner. Krista has more than 30 years of results driven experience, ranging from association management to printing and communications to real estate. Krista is excited about supporting businesses through the work of the Chamber, being a community leader, builder, and economic development driver for Fredericton. Krista lives on the Fredericton's north side with her daughter, Rachel.
Thanks so much, Nandi, for the introduction. I'm just realizing it makes me sound a little bit old, so I might have to adjust some of those, how many years I was at each place. So delighted to be here as part of the Apex virtual business plan competition this year. I've been a judge for the last number of years for this competition, and just so delighted to be here and to host this panel tonight. We have an awesome panel. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. And what we're going to do this evening is we're going to start with a little introduction of each person. And they're going to talk a little bit about themselves, who they are, what their business is. But they're also going to tell us what they found to be the top disruption in their work or in their business in the past year. And then we're going to ask some other fun questions. So how about we start with you, Adam? Introduce yourself and tell us what was the top disruption you found in the past year.
All right. Well, hi, Krista and Alicia and Curtis and everyone here at Apex 2021. Certainly really happy to be here, and found myself, leaving today's judging just so exhilarated about all of the business opportunities that we saw presented. So great to be with you. In my day job, I work as director of Planet Hatch, which is an entrepreneurship center located here in Fredericton, New Brunswick. The 2016 startup capital of Canada, for any of those across Canada and around the world. And what our job is to, through programs, services, our 2 co-working spaces, network of mentors and subject matter experts, as well as funding, we to try to bring all of these valuable resources to support early stage entrepreneurs and work with them to develop globally competitive companies. And in terms of COVID-19, certainly it's been a very disruptive year for entrepreneurs. And I know we're going to hear more about that through the experiences of Alicia and Curtis and so many others that we've heard from. We'll get a little bit more, I think, into what that's meant. But in terms of disruption, I think that one of the coolest things in our areas is just the overall innovativeness that entrepreneurs have demonstrated through this. And there was a period of time, March and April. Krista, I know you can relate to this. We were getting so many calls from business owners trying to figure out, where do I go for help? What do I do next? How do I, keep cash in the bank and keep my employees here? And what we've seen to a large extent is that forward-looking, innovative, adaptable entrepreneurs have been able to not only survive the crisis, but find opportunities to build their businesses better in a new way and to really thrive. So that disruption, I think, has been a good positive that we've been able to see.
Thanks, Adam. I appreciate that answer. And you're right. We received hundreds of phone calls and emails and messages from our members. And I know you were in the same situation, just looking for clarity and trying to synthesize all the information that was coming at them. Alicia, I'm going to turn to you. Tell us a bit about your business and what was the biggest disruption for you in the past year?
Sure. Thanks, Krista. So I'm Alicia Phillips. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Educated Beards. We manufacture and distribute all natural and organic men's grooming products. I think for us, the biggest disruption was really that our business prior to COVID was very much a business to business, a B2B business. And through COVID, we had to pivot dramatically just to stay alive. However, the positives of that is it did give us an opportunity to really work on our brand awareness. So again, like Adam kind of touched on, these disruptions also can have kind of a light at the end of the tunnel.
So true. I'm going to turn next to Curtis and tell us a little bit about your business and what did you find to be the biggest disruption in your business this past year?
Okay. Hi guys, I'm Curtis Kennedy. I'm the founder and CEO of a company here in Fredericton called Vertiball. So Vertiball is a line of personal muscle care devices that uses this industrial grade suction cup system to mount onto walls, so you can target specific areas of your back that have pain with complete control and over where you're applying the pressure and how much pressure you apply. So I was actually a participant at the Apex competition a few years ago, and it was pretty cool today to get to be a part of the judging panel. So really happy to be here and really happy to have survived through this really challenging time, because I know it's been very difficult for a lot of people. Personally, for us, and the biggest challenge that we had was right out of the gate. We manufacture our products over in China, and right after Chinese New Year, which is always a really big portion of time where everyone's away from factories, and you really have to plan around your supply chain to accommodate that time gap. Right after that period of time is when the outbreak happened over there. So we didn't just have one full month because of Chinese New Year. It was another month on top of that. So it was pretty challenging. Our inventory was very limited for a decent period of time, and furthermore, there was a lot of businesses quickly trying to transition to sell their products through e-commerce. So the ad space became very saturated, very expensive, and the traditional way we were operating our business became much more challenging. But with time, we figured things out, and we remained dynamic and adapted to the situation, and we're still in the clear, thankfully.
That's great. And each of us can tell stories of the things that happened to us throughout the course of the last almost a full year now that we've been in this situation and facing the pandemic. But every story is unique, and everybody has faced a little different challenge. And what's exciting is when I hear entrepreneurs talking about how they face those challenges head on and figured out ways to solve those problems. And I guess that's what entrepreneurship is about. It's solving problems. So I'm going to start with some questions, and I'm going to start with you first, Adam. Would you say there are any silver linings from COVID-19 or any new opportunities that have happened within that startup and entrepreneurial space?
Yeah, thanks, Krista. And I think the first point I would make in my answer would be just related to what we were just talking about. I think that one of the silver linings a lot of people found personally, whether they were an entrepreneur or otherwise, is that we really can take on a lot more than I think a lot of us probably thought a year ago we could. And when I look at that in the entrepreneurial space, I think there's three things that really come to the top. One is, adaptability. Curtis and Alicia just kind of referenced how they had to adapt to different circumstances. I think second, also, they mentioned is that most entrepreneurs that were successful stayed really focused on their customers above all else. And then thirdly, I think that you started to see, particularly over the summer and into the fall months, really that forward-looking innovation lens come through. And there are countless stories locally and globally, I think, of entrepreneurs and businesses that have been able to use those three elements to achieve success within COVID-19. And I think that overall, our economy, both in Canada and globally, is going to become stronger because we've all gone through this type of experience, and those that are left still standing are stronger because of it. The other thing, that I think in terms of silver linings, or maybe, something we can all look forward to, is some I'm frozen here for a second.
Oh, you're back.
Oh, there we go. All right. So I think the second piece of that is, looking comparatively of where the economy is at versus where we were at in the last recession. And I know a lot of our audience members, the students, that was 12 years ago. So they might not remember it as well as some of us on the panel. But back in 2008 and 2009, we had the global financial recession. And I think it's interesting to see what has changed since the last recession. There's a couple that I would note. First, Kickstarter, born in 2009 after the financial crisis. That wasn't around the last time. Secondly, the iPhone was just launched, the original iPhone, about a year before the last recession. Facebook in 2009 only had 150 million users. They're up to close to 2 billion or more right now. And they certainly didn't have features like Marketplace, etc. Instagram, the same thing. And there's many, many others, Uber, Airbnb, even cultural influences on entrepreneurship like Shark Tank. Huge show. I think it's influenced that for a lot of people. That only started in 2009. And so I think one of the points I would make is that over this time period, there's been a lot of structural changes and innovation that have broken down traditional barriers for entrepreneurs, that has limited individuals' ability to be entrepreneurs themselves, right? Before Kickstarter, I'm sure Curtis can talk about that, but it was really hard to find money, right, to get your idea to the next phase. Really hard to be able to reach consumers like I know Educated Beards have done so successfully using the internet, right? And so what I think could be a really positive silver lining coming out of COVID-19, we do typically see a strong correlation between a recession and self-employment. When people are out of work, they turn to their own devices, and usually we see more businesses being started. This will be the first recession since we've had those structural changes that have broken down traditional barriers towards entrepreneurship. And so a prediction I'm making now, I guess publicly, and has kept me hopeful over the last several months, is I think we're going to see more startup activity, more new businesses started all around the world than we ever have before historically coming out of COVID-19.
Adam, that is a really insightful answer, and I know that I was a business owner during the recession in the 2008-9 timeframe, and it was really tough. But you're right, innovations came from that, and it'll be exciting to see what kinds of innovations come from this time. One thing that I learned that was a silver lining for me is I really didn't understand that myself and my team had the ability to work remotely. I really felt that we had to be in the office all day, every day. And I've recognized that, there's more flexibility to our working environment. And that's been great. I mean, we still want to be in the office where we can have that face-to-face with mask interaction, but we can also work at home, and we have these wonderful tools where we can still interact with each other on Teams and Zoom and platforms like this. So, there's a lot of things that we've learned from it that may be silver linings. My next question is going to be for you, Alicia. How have the changes brought on by COVID-19 shifted customer behavior? And what changes in customer behavior do you think are going to be permanent?
Well, I think, one of the main things that we've noticed is a trend towards online shopping. Statistics Canada show that between February 2020 and May 2020, online shopping almost doubled and continues to rise since then. I think, as a society, we're always generally very, very busy. So having the opportunity to experience the convenience of online shopping, curbside pickup, I do think that this trend will continue well beyond the pandemic. Another thing that we've noticed is that it kind of seems like consumers are two very separate groups right now. One being the essentials only. I would probably attribute that to people that have lost their jobs during the pandemic or have become financially unstable or stressed. And then the other group being, you're at home with pay and the consumers that have actually upped their spending. The third, I guess, notable behavior would be the support local movement. Now, this has been around for a while, which is great. Yeah, I agree. But since, March 2020, I feel that people experiencing their local shops that they're used to going to close, or seeing that lack of supplies that are not available, I think have really, increased the conversation on shop local. And I do think that this is another behavior that will continue well beyond the pandemic.
Yeah, we're certainly seeing a lot of grassroots movement towards supporting local. And I think people are recognizing that if they support the businesses in their community during these difficult times, that's the only way those businesses will be around, when we get through this pandemic. And I think that people are starting to really see too the impacts that the health regulations and the public safety regulations are having on businesses when they restrict, how many people can be in a business or those sorts of things. And people are recognizing that they have to, step up and do even more and make, a concerted effort to support local. Curtis, my next question is for you. What impacts on supply chains and export markets do you anticipate going forward? How do you think that will impact people that are in the manufacturing business?
Yeah, so it'll be really interesting to see how everything unfolds, and I think my answer to that plays a lot into what Alicia was saying about there being a big growth through e-commerce sales. So sort of the holy grail for a consumer product company has always been big box retail, where you can get out high volumes and there's consistent order cycle. And with that, when you're working with a big retailer, you can use tools like purchase order financing. You can work with banks and they can help you finance your inventory purchases. Whereas when you're going to be more focused to rely on e-commerce, it's dependent on your cash flow for the most part. There's some new companies that are coming out. A notable one that we've ended up working with is called ClearBank, that will help you fund your inventory purchases for non-guaranteed sales. But I think there's going to be a lot of challenge, but at the same time, a lot of new opportunity, because e-commerce represents such a large opportunity for small businesses, especially to get off the ground and get running quickly. Back before there was all these marketplaces online, if you were a physical product company, you'd be going and knocking on doors saying, hey, can you sell my product? And you build up your vendor list. But for an e-commerce company, you can really get out there right away, and if you have the right amount of margin to work with, then you can really scale quickly. So that's a really important point that I would stress to everyone who's considering manufacturing a product. Is out of the gate is the only time you have control of what the rest of your business is going to look like, and making your unit cost as low as possible and making the best product possible is really essential. Because let's say your cost of goods sold is $10, and you're trying to sell your product for $20. That $10 that $10 is everything that is going to be representative of your business. All your payroll, all the expenses you'll incur, all the new developments you're working on. So having something that can be marketed and sold through e-commerce at a customer acquisition cost that can be scaled consistently is very important. So my biggest recommendation to anyone thinking about getting into a consumer product is really find the product that is different, that you're excited about, and make sure that the pricing structure is right out of the gate, because it's the one thing you have control of, and the rest is all stuff that you're going to have to react to. So while the ball is in your court, really try your best to minimize your costs in any way you can, and maximize the value of your product to your customers.
If I could add a question to that, if you're manufacturing and your manufacturer has been overseas and you're finding that there is a disruption, how difficult is it to get something manufactured domestically that you haven't had to do in the past?
Yeah, it really depends. If your product is comprised of sourceable components, sourceable meaning that they're pre-existing components that are manufactured for all sorts of different things like screws or bolts or metal plates, then it could be relatively straightforward. But if your product has custom components that are, say, plastic injection molded, that use a custom process to make possible, then it becomes very challenging, because the equipment to make those custom parts are very expensive, and as a startup, it doesn't make sense in terms of your capital structure to have more than one set of plastic injection molds to do your whole product. So it's really difficult, and it's you can get caught in a situation where you have inventory shortages. So I do think that's the one big value proposition for manufacturing domestically, is that the order cycle will be cut down by a significant amount. Our current order cycle is 60 to 70 days. So that means, as soon as we place an order, as soon as inventory arrives, we're placing an order for our next batch of products that aren't going to get here for another 70 days. So that means that whatever we just invested out of our account is gone for 70 days. So that's traditionally the way it goes for an e-commerce business, because there's not a whole bunch of financial institutions that fund inventory purchases for e-commerce at this point, because there's no guarantee of return, because it's totally dependent on how well your ads are working and how well your ads are converting. So whereas normal traditional retailer, if you had a purchase order, then you could get a bank to finance that, and then you would have the cash flow to support the other activities with your company. So manufacturing overseas, having a long production cycle is difficult. It comes with its perks, but also definitely its challenges.
You definitely have to be able to predict your sales and have a good sense of what you're going to be selling, in the next quarter, because that's what you're ordering for. So definitely challenging, and maybe being able to source more closely would have less of that impact, but more expensive perhaps. But perhaps that's an opportunity for another startup, that type of manufacturing.
Yeah.
I'm going to turn back to you, Adam. One of the things we're hearing about is labor market, access to labor, newcomer workforce. What do you see as the major impacts that have happened during the pandemic in that regard, with regards to labor, and where do you see it going?
Yeah, great question, Krista. I think, we've talked already about some trends that were affecting the economy pre-COVID. I've always liked to think about, or since COVID's happened, I've liked to think about it as more of an accelerant than a game changer. And so some of the trends we've talked about, online shopping, as Alicia mentioned, accelerated vastly over those 2 months. The shift to remote work that you were talking about, Krista, within your office, that had been a trend pre-COVID, really accelerated, obviously, by necessity. We've even joked too, I'm sure amongst friends, people that were going to have a baby or thinking about a baby a year ago, they probably have a baby now. People that might have been on the rocks with their relationship, they might be in divorce territory now. So COVID, we were joking before the panel, you kind of feel like you're in a time warp where the days are going super fast and the weeks feel like months. And that certainly, I think, has been brought to every trend in the economy. And as it relates to labor, one of the ones we knew was starting to take place pre-COVID was this move by businesses towards greater automation, investing in technologies like artificial intelligence and machine learning, and the impact that would have on the labor force. And that has also been accelerated through COVID-19. Hard to hear for maybe some people, but if you're a business owner and you're limited in terms of access to customers and your employees essentially have to be laid off anyway because they can't come to work, it's probably no better time to invest in that technology that may create greater efficiencies and lower your costs than right now, right? Because keeping the business alive and thriving and positioned for growth is paramount. And so what does that mean for the labor force? Well, when you look at the skills that these technologies can replace, they're pretty repetitive and pattern-based skills. Then you can look at the skills that those technologies can't replace. And those skills don't fall into a pattern-based or repetitive system. And they're things like creativity or thinking outside of a box. They're things like emotional intelligence, problem solving, being able to lead and influence people. And when we look at what those skills all have in common, I think the four of us all know those are all skills that you find in the most successful entrepreneurs, right? And so when you look at some of the studies that would have come out pre-COVID, they would have estimated, a Royal Bank of Canada would have estimated up to 50% of all jobs in Canada were going to have to be redeveloped or have to find new individuals or be totally eliminated because of these investments in new technologies. Globally, that's looking like about 14% of the jobs globally are going to have to be changed because of these investments in technology. And so what we're looking at in the future of work is that every job is going to require individuals with entrepreneurial skills to fill them. Because the jobs that don't need those skills, they're not going to exist. A machine is going to be doing that. I'd make the point too, if you think about it from a return on investment perspective, most business owners are not going to immediately replace the lower line employees like we typically tend to think about. They're going to get a greater return on their investment in that technology if they eliminate, the top line individuals in their organization. I often use the example of, who at a law firm is going to be replaced first? Is it the $6K figure salary lawyer, or is it going to be, multiple receptionists? Just think about it from an ROI perspective. Point is that, these technologies are an equal opportunity offender and that all jobs are potentially at risk. So for everyone in the audience, particularly the students, whether you decide to pursue a career in entrepreneurship or not, you're still going to require these entrepreneurial skills. And I would suggest that everyone find opportunities to develop and strengthen those skills. The second piece, I think, is that, there was this globalization trend that was in place long before COVID-19. We talked earlier about global supply chains, being able to harness global demand because of online shopping marketplaces. One of the last, elements of the economy to catch up with this globalization trend has been the labor force. And the big change we've seen through COVID-19, to your point, Krista, remote work is the norm now. So you truly have a global labor force that's starting to emerge and that you see entrepreneurs really starting to invest in. The model before COVID-19 was you at least had to have some type of beachfront or, some location to hang your shingle on if you're going to be hiring employees in that area. That's no longer the case, as we all know. So I think, as we move forward, you're going to see, again, this increasing adoption of technologies. Employers are going to demand employees that don't come to them knowing a bunch of information. They don't care as much about that. What you know is what you can do and the skills that you can use. And they're going to be looking for talent all around the world. And their organizations are going to have to adopt to more, cultures to be able to compete, to be able to find ways to really invest in their employees and to be, competitive from an employer standpoint. We talk about value propositions a lot in entrepreneurship. We don't talk a lot about your value proposition as an employer and how you can compete on that. So I think those are all trends that we're going to see continuing to affect the labor force that's going to become increasingly global, increasingly entrepreneurial.
It's interesting when you talk about the globalization. We saw that today in the pitches that we heard from the various students that were bringing their products and their businesses to us. They were from all over the world. They weren't all students from the University of New Brunswick. It was a global competition, and that made it a great competition because the competition was quite fierce. But yeah, we're living in a global economy for sure. I'm going to turn now to Alicia. What do you see as the impacts on team wellness, team cohesiveness when people are working remotely? And from an HR perspective, how do you think businesses are going to manage their teams differently going forward?
I think that we have all seen a major decline in mental health all across the board. I think a part of that is attributed to the isolation that COVID has brought with people working from home, with, your friend at work isn't there anymore because they have to work at home, even if you are in the office. So I think whether you enjoy working from home or not, it's been proven that humans are very much social beings. So I think from an HR perspective, it's important to recognize and make adjustments and take actions to keep your team engaged and keep them feeling really that they're a part of something. There's many ways that can be accomplished through, company culture, or like Krista mentioned, the virtual tools that we have available to us that we're all becoming very comfortable and accustomed to at this point. And just generally being aware of how this can have a direct impact on your staff. Assuming that, everything isn't just straightforward, that people are, just working from home. It's a little bit more than that. So I think we do, as company owners, we need to work really hard to keep our staff engaged. Daily check-ins. For us, we've continued as much as possible to keep things normal. So we've celebrated the same things we would celebrate in-house just through a virtual platform. So to date, we've celebrated a couple birthdays virtually, and we even managed to pull off a Secret Santa. So as much as possible, keeping things as normal, kind of in this crazy time. And that's just promoting wellness, promoting, health. We do that through, we have posters that we send out in emails. A couple of the things that we've implemented since March is once a month we send our team members to a massage therapy treatment. And we've also started a financially incentivized book club, I guess, just to, keep people really focused on self-care and to promote the importance of that. Another thing that we've implemented as far as managing staff when they are working from home is tools like Miro. I never know if it's Miro or Miro, but I think at this point, most people know what I'm talking about. And Trello, just to keep expectations across the board and, to keep that management and that organization consistent, even when they're not, just outside your office. And then the last thing that I think, and it's been touched on many times, is just the working from home. I think companies now realize that it is a possibility, and why would you have all of the overhead of rent or owning an office building when most of your team can work from home? So I think moving past the pandemic, we'll see a lot of companies continue to keep the majority of their staff at home where possible.
I'm hearing from businesses that are looking at hybrid models as well, where people will have the opportunity to work from home, but have the interaction of working with their peers in a workspace from time to time as well. But definitely the things that you've touched upon and working to sort of keep your team motivated and inspired. I heard from a company recently that brought a psychologist in and allowed everybody to go and have an hour of therapy and just to kind of talk about what they were dealing with and what was happening at home. Because, working at home for different people can pose different challenges if you've got kids, or maybe you've got 4 roommates, right? Or maybe you don't have an office set up, you're working at the kitchen table. So there's lots of challenges, and as entrepreneurs, to be creative enough to figure out how to work within those and support your team. We're going into our last question, and I want to encourage those of you who are watching to send in your questions. We're going to have about 10 or 15 minutes for Q&A after we finish our last question here, and then we're going to tie it up with a little bit of advice at the very end from each of our panelists. So our final question before we hit the Q&A is for you, Curtis. Do you think most businesses are willing and able to pivot as needed, and are pivots full turnarounds, or are they just a process adjustment?
Okay, yeah. So in entrepreneurship, pivot, it's sometimes looked at with a negative light, especially by the entrepreneurs themselves. It's sometimes hard considering having to change the direction when you're so certain that the original path that you had chose to go might not be the right way. So I think, especially for all the entrepreneurs listening in the audience, is right now, if you were ever going to make a serious pivot, right now is the time to do it. And pivots can really be justified through things like speaking with customers. It was really cool to see a company today that I watched them present. They made the barbecue accessory. I forget the name right now, but seeing how they really communicated with their customers and got feedback, and that sort of led them to the development process that they went on. Originally, we make these assumptions as to how our business should be, and we're strong on that. But the best things, and well, I guess the thing you can refer to is nature. The things in nature that survive are the things that adapt. And I would urge everyone to always be dynamic, be willing to be open to change, because the world doesn't stay the same from the way you see it right now. And owning a business is a crazy thing. I feel like I have no idea what I'm doing most of the time, to be honest with you. I feel like I'm taking all the information that's around me that I know right now, and I'm speaking with my coworkers, and we make our best guess from our gut feeling, because none of us have had the experience or failures or the successes to really guide our decisions. So you just have to consider all the variables around you and always just try to make your best decision. Don't think too much on it, but if there's something that's really telling you to change, then you have to listen to it. And the best entrepreneurs will be the ones that listen to it and really can change with the way the world moves. And so I think pivoting as a whole, we've seen it at its finest this year, because there's so many businesses that had to change the course of the direction. The service-based industry, especially in restaurants, there certainly wasn't plans for what happens if our revenues get cut in 50%, and that's why the government needed to step in. And there's lots of people that got really creative with their services, and the people that got creative and thought about new ways to do things are definitely the ones that are going to make it through this. And so I think pivoting is a word that should be celebrated. I think it's probably the most important thing to hold on to as you go and start your business. Regardless of how big or small the pivot, doing so is always going to change the direction and get you to the place that you're supposed to go, if you're willing to remain open to doing it and be pliable and willing to change.
We have a need for products and services today that we didn't even know existed a year ago. Companies that have pivoted to making hand sanitizer, or I look at here in Fredericton, we have Lumen Ultra Technologies, which pivoted from being a water testing business to being a COVID test business, and have shipped out millions and millions of COVID tests from Fredericton. So, businesses that can figure out that pivot and figure out what to do next and be nimble enough to do it. That's going to be the key, right?
Absolutely.
So our first question that's come in from our audience, and I'll let whoever wants to sort of speak up first can take it, and if the other two have something to add, please feel free. The question is, how do we navigate the lines between home and office when we're working from home? So I guess how do we keep home home and work work?
Alicia, you want to start us off on that one?
Sure. So Curtis probably recommended I start off because for the first year, we actually ran our business out of our kitchen, which we then referred to as our production facility, and our living room, which we then referred to as our shipping and storage area. So I think a really important part is try to find a space that you dedicate to being your workspace. I know that's not possible, but if you have a corner, even in a spare room or a corner of your living room that you kind of go to and do your work. The other thing is, we're all on Zoom. So it's easy to wear a nice blazer on the top and then have pajama pants on. But I would encourage people to actually get dressed, put on what you would normally wear to the office. It is going to have a big impact on your day. And, take your breaks. Schedule them just like you would if you were in the office. That means getting up away from your desk longer than to just walk to your kitchen to refill your coffee.
That's a really good answer. I am not wearing pajama pants in case anybody's wondering, but I am wearing jeans, which I normally would not wear for a work function. Any other additions to that?
I would just say.
Oh, go ahead, Curtis.
All right. Yeah, I would just say all I would add to that is it's really important to have some sort of line in the sand between work and home, because when it becomes jumbled up into one, especially as an entrepreneur starting a business and you're working 16, 18 hours a day, you can get sort of lost in it. So even if you can do things like take a call while you're going for a drive on Bluetooth, or you can go for a walk, just being able to get out of the house and work in different settings, if you can, I think it makes the world a difference for keeping your home and not just your work life.
How about you, Adam? Anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I agree with the points that were made. The only thing I would add, I found really helpful for myself was to do, mimic my commute. So I didn't do the full drive back and forth from the office, but at 7:45, when I normally would be in the car on the way there, I would take the dog for a walk around the block. And then when I'd usually finish up at work around 5:30, I'd take the dog for another walk. And just that just put me into a different mental state, which I found really helpful.
I found during the months or the weeks, I guess about 8 weeks that I worked 100% from home, it was even just to stop and have an actual meal instead of just working through, to stop, go sit at the table and have a meal with my daughter. And that made it have more of a semblance of normalcy. The next question's popped up on the screen there. What changes do you think are permanent, and what things do you think will go back to the old norm? Who wants to tackle that one?
Oh, that's a tough one. And if I could predict it accurately, I'd probably have some my money in some stocks and be making some money. All I can do is guess, and I think that's all anyone could ever do at this point. But I do think that there will be a long-lasting effect on brick and mortar retail. I think that brick and mortar retail will always be in place, and I think it's essential, and it's how a lot of consumers like to buy their goods. But I think that it will be, as a product vendor, I think it'll be much more difficult to get your products in brick and mortar retail, because there will be some gradual decline in business for them over time. So they will keep the products in there that are selling and that they're having a high turnaround rate on. And for new novel products that haven't necessarily received the validation from customers and previous experience selling to retail, I think it might be a lot more challenging to get in. Not to say that it's going to be impossible, but I think that for people looking to sell a product it's going to, it's going to be good to focus your efforts through e-commerce and have that as like in your back pocket thing. If that works, then that's great, but we need to figure out something beforehand, because there will be challenges in that realm of things.
I think for retailers, especially the brick and mortar retailers that you refer to, I think they too are going to have to they will have to have an online presence that's perhaps greater or better than it had been in the past, because people will want to know before they go to that store, what can I find there? I'm looking for something specific. I want to feel it, touch it, hold it, smell it. But I want to make sure it's there before I go, and I want to, do my comparison. So they want to have sort of the best of both worlds. Other comments about things that we think are going to be permanent, and what do you think is going back to the old way, Adam?
I guess I just wanted to chime in on the retail part of the discussion as well, and I agree with the points that both you, Krista, and Curtis had made. I do think, though, there's going to be a really great opportunity for those entrepreneurs who want to go retail, that have product that can be experiential in nature. And so, and I think there's going to be a huge hunger coming out of this for people to go out, to be able to actually look, feel, touch, smell, whatever the actual products that they're buying. Yeah, there's a bunch of pros with the online shopping, but I think that there is going to be that hunger. To Alicia's point, we are social animals by nature, and I think we really like to experience that some of those elements in our shopping. And so whether it's a restaurant or a small retailer with whatever product, I just encourage you to try and find ways that you can latch onto that, and to make the experience online, that is your new, the new sign that you would hang outside your store, essentially, right? What's, for you to have your opening pitch, I think, is how you should think about it for online. And then the retail is where you can really get a customer who has strong brand loyalty. And I think that the brand loyalty element is another trend that all entrepreneurs should be thinking about. There's so many options in almost every single category. And I think Alicia and Curtis could speak a lot to this, right? They've been able to find ways to really develop a close relationship with their customers that keeps them coming back. And so I think that also is going to be really important, is that customer relationship segment. A lot of entrepreneurs sometimes only think about sales in terms of the cash dollars coming in and out. You really have to be concentrating on how to make sure every experience from start to finish that a customer has with your company feels that. And I don't know, Alicia, I know just as a purchaser of some of your goods, you guys have done that exceptionally well, in my opinion. So I don't know if you have anything to add or anything else, but that's a couple thoughts for me.
Well, thank you very much, Adam. I appreciate that. I think you touched on anything I could really add. It really is different than just selling a product. We have products, but we are a customer service company. And I think, especially moving forward, it's essential that you position your business as that.
So we've got 2 or 3 minutes left to answer questions from our audience, and we have 2 or 3 questions. So let's hit them as quickly as we can, so we get as many in as we can. Here's a question that's interesting. When should you pivot, or when should you hold on and wait and assess a situation when we're in a time of so much rapid change? Who wants to grab that one?
I think that just my thoughts there would be, if there is a foreseeable path to move forward on, even like in this time, not considering that it will get back to normal. If there is a path that will present large opportunity at this time, then pursue it. But if it's an idea that will only work if the world goes back to normal and things are the way that they are, then that should be a telltale sign that it can't operate in all conditions that the world is working in. So whatever it is you're working on, you want to make sure that it's resilient beyond any situation like this. and it can overcome certain things that are going to happen. None of us could predict this, but there's likely to be more crises moving forward in the future. Who knows when? So just think about it and really consider, does it have the strength and the resilience to make it through something challenging like this? And if so, I think it's worth pursuing.
Good answer. Is there anything you'd like to add, or should I pop on to the next question? Adam, I think the next question might be one that might be good for you, given your work with Planet Hatch. As a result of the pandemic, accessing funds from banks and VCs has become increasingly difficult. What are other alternatives for startups that are looking to scale their business and they need funds for growing?
Yeah, I guess from what I've heard from most of the entrepreneurs that Planet Hatch works with, and there may be certainly regional discrepancies with the question, but for the entrepreneurs that we've worked with, and we work with about 180 per year, 180 businesses on an annual basis, that hasn't really been their experience. I think that right now is a great time to raise or go after cash if you're looking to, and that's assuming that your business model and what you're valuing your business at, if you're taking on equity, or that you have a very strong plan of how you're actually going to be able to repay your lenders. Assuming all of that is in place, I think that there's a lot of different opportunities to raise cash. And if the traditional, VC or bank route isn't working out for you, depending on your stage, Kickstarter, great option to be able to raise, or crowdfunding in general, particularly when you're in sort of the product development prototyping stage. I do think that there is a lot of support available through government, and there's a number of investments that have been made in Canada where access to credit financing or grants is relatively easily accessible. There's organizations across Canada and around the world like Planet Hatch that I know have a lot of contacts, relationships, and are willing to provide introductions to support you in accessing the money that you're looking for. And what I also find is interesting is that the traditional step-by-step process for entrepreneurship is changing, and we got a little bit into that. Only 40% of the companies that we've supported in year 1 and year 2 haven't actually taken outside money. They found a way to be able to bootstrap themselves. And when we've surveyed them and asked them why, because we do know there's availability, they'll tell us that, that's their preference. They want to keep as much as their company for as long as possible. So they're shy from equity-based investments. They, worry about what the economy is going to look like and where interest rates will go a few years from now. So, taking on debt may not be a good option. And I would say that the best entrepreneurs and the most successful that I've seen over the long term, find a way to stretch every single dollar in the early stages. And they are not keen to take on a ton of money, because that also brings on a ton of extra problems. You have to be thinking about how, I have to get on a phone with an investor every single week if I'm taking that outside money on. I'm going to have to showcase to the bank where I'm at, et cetera. And so you're starting to serve many more masters. I think the most successful entrepreneurs, at least in the early stages, their only master is the customer that they're trying to sell to. And they try to use as much or get as far as they can with the money that they have in their own pocket.
We're going to take one last question from the floor. We're going to be finished right around 7:30, so we'll take one last question from our audience, and then we're going to finish up with a closing comment from each of you. So the last question, do you think COVID-19 will have a lasting effect on the education sector? A little bit different topic. Yes,
I do. I know Curtis or Alicia want to chime in, but I just say briefly, touching on what I was saying earlier, think about it this way. How has the education system been designed for centuries? Primarily, it is to transfer information, and the goal for students is to memorize it and spit it back out. What does that mean in light of Google and all the other things that the internet has brought, where information can be accessed in milliseconds and it's essentially free? So our entire education system is no longer relevant. I understand what that could come off as at a university pitch competition. But I think what you're finding in the education system, so they saw this trend coming as well, and you see a massive level of investment and focus around experiential education, which is an opportunity to develop skills. And going back to the earlier point, if you're working on entrepreneurial skills itself, you look at most surveys around the world, that consistently makes up the skill sets that employers are looking for most broadly across industries, across sectors. And so I think that you're going to see a lot more experiential education, a lot more focus on skills building over acquiring information. And I think the entire dynamic, you're going to see things like what just happened with all of you this week, that may actually end up being a full-term course, right? I think you're going to see a move towards that.
A lot more experiential and using the tools that are at our disposal now that we might not have had either. Thank you all for those great answers. They were really, really interesting, and I know our audience enjoyed them. I want to finish up with each of you having a moment to give a few closing remarks, and I want you to talk about two things. First of all, how you've been impacted by COVID. But secondly, what is the biggest piece of advice that you would give an aspiring entrepreneur to weather this storm, or to move forward, or to get their business going? What is the best advice you'd give, and how were you most impacted in the last year? Adam, should we start with you?
Sure. I won't focus too much on myself impact. Like I've been really fortunate personally through COVID-19. Like I've had job security. I've had the chance to work with entrepreneurs on really, tough challenges that they were facing, and I get a lot of satisfaction if we can, just do one small thing to help, whether it's just connecting to them to someone, or helping them apply for support or funding or what have you. But I will, suggest for all of the aspiring entrepreneurs in the audience, you've heard throughout this panel session how quickly things can change. And I think how quickly your business model may become, irrelevant, or, need to change in several hours or several days. And so when you're thinking about pivots or being able to succeed during times of rapid change, I think it's really important to focus on what your purpose is, not just the business model. So what's the purpose of your company? And that can be a North Star that can help to guide some of your decision making when it's time to pivot, or when you're faced with challenges. And, when you're thinking about what your purpose is, I had the chance to talk about this in my workshop earlier, but, think about what you're good at, think about what you love, and think about how you want to serve the world, or what breaks your heart. And where those three elements combine, that really can be where your purpose is. And I would suggest that each aspiring entrepreneur that's looking to develop their company, identify what your purpose is first, and that can help you make a lot of decisions over the long term to embark on.
Adam, that's a great answer, and that's good advice, not just for starting entrepreneurs, but for any of us to be mindful of those things. Alicia, I'm going to turn to you.
Sure. So we've mostly been impacted because, like I mentioned before, we are a B2B business originally. We've pivoted to B2C. And so there are many of our retailers throughout the United States that still don't even have their doors open. So I think our biggest impact is how long it's taking for the world to regulate, for lack of a better word. And we're excited for the day that happens. Advice to entrepreneurs, new entrepreneurs, or considering becoming an entrepreneur is just go for it. Do your research, obviously be prepared. But I think a big part of being an entrepreneur is you have to be able to take risks. And that first risk is just stepping out and doing it. So, go in with an open mind, be as resilient as possible, but go for it.
That's great advice too. Go for it, make the leap. And if you can be successful in these times, you can literally be successful in any time. So that's good advice. Curtis, over to you for the last piece of advice and how the pandemic has impacted you the most.
Pandemic has, I guess, beyond that first 2 months where we had a lot of supply chain issues, it's been tough not being at the office every day with the team. But just really, I think as individuals, emotionally, it's been really challenging, and I think a lot of people consider themselves strong, but times like this can really challenge your feelings towards that. And I don't know, whenever this ends, I'm looking to have a big office party and come in here and do some dancing. But yeah, dancing, I think that's what I miss the most. No, but biggest advice to an entrepreneur is really, there's a lot of people that they'll come up with a solution to a problem that's an improvement of what someone's already done. And I would say that the best thing you can do and the most powerful thing that can lead to a great product or service is to think about your own best solution without considering the limitations of technology, and really look at the problem without looking at the pre-existing solutions, because there are certain product segments that have been made and approaches that were taken to creating these product segments that for 100 years they've been building off of the original invention or service. But if you really think about the problem, Elon Musk talks about it from a first principle design thinking approach, where you boil the problem down to its fundamental truths and then build outwards, rather than thinking analogously, which is looking at other things that exist and then making improvements to those. My suggestion would be to really think different about problems and try to come up with your own best solution, because there's a possibility that what you end up coming up with might have been better than the product segment that's to kick the whole industry off. So if you do that and you work really hard, it's really difficult, and there's a lot of really challenging days. But if you believe in what you're doing, it makes it so worth it, and it's a lot of fun. So with what Alicia said, just go for it.
And what you've just said also ties back to what Adam talked about earlier in our panel when he was talking about the skills that are going to be the most important. And those are the skills of creativity and to be able to think outside the box. And I think those are entrepreneurial skills that have never gone out of style. So we know that the entrepreneurs and the budding entrepreneurs and the people who want to be entrepreneurs in the future that are watching this evening, this is all very good advice for them. So I want to thank the three of you. It's always a pleasure to spend time with you and to hear your thoughts and to understand your thinking about everything from pandemic to product to all those things that we've talked about. So thank you so much for that. And thanks to all of you who are watching this evening. We're going to sign off now and say good evening, but we'll see you back in I guess about 30 minutes for the awards. So thanks very much for participating tonight in the Future of Entrepreneurship panel. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.